Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special council meeting of Tuesday, June 29th. It is a virtual council meeting, hopefully our last for a while. All of council is present except for Councillor Yeo at this time. I'm assuming he's going to be joining us shortly. I would like to call the meeting to order, and before I ask for a motion for the adoption of the agenda, I just want to say a few words. On our council chamber's desk sits a tiny pair of shoes to remind us of 751 lives, many of them children who never came home from their residential school in Saskatchewan. This is in addition to the 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops. We pause to reflect on this tremendous loss. On behalf of council and the entire municipality, we offer our deepest condolences to the families of those whose remains were found in Saskatchewan. We offer heartfelt sympathy to the Cowessess First Nation and our neighboring First Nations communities, Curve Lake First Nation, Hiawatha First Nation, and Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. As Canadians, this is our time to educate ourselves, take action, and raise awareness of the tragic history that has unfolded from the residential school system and its lasting effects on so many lives today. As a municipality, we will continue to acknowledge these atrocities and address the need for reconciliation with action. Our flags are lowered to half-mast as a reflection of our sorrow, and every night in July, City Hall will be lit up with an orange light. We will work with First Nations communities to honor the memory of these children in coming weeks and months. Please join me for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for Tuesday be adopted? Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Elmsley. Any questions? All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on today's agenda? Seeing none. Deputations, we have none. Correspondence, we have none. Presentations, we're going to move right into 6.1. Our first presentation is from a Healthy City, Strong Community presentation, and I'm going to introduce Kelly Isfan, the President and CEO of Ross Memorial Hospital, and perhaps, Kelly, you can introduce the others who are joining you today for your presentation. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thanks, Your Worship. Mayor Latham, members of council, and staff. Today, we're really pleased to be here with you to share some plans for the future of Ross Memorial Hospital and by extension, the future of our whole community. And with me today are Dr. Mario Voros, who's our Chief of Radiology at the hospital, and Aaron Coons, who is and some other person that's with me, and Aaron, who is the Executive Director of the Ross Memorial Hospital Foundation. So let's move right to the first slide, please. And first, it's my pleasure to thank you and acknowledge the city's past support of Ross Memorial Hospital. Going back to 2002, where the city granted the hospital $7 million, which helped RMH double the size of the hospital and go from 156 to 218 beds. And that $7 million was 40% of the local share required to expand the hospital at the time. And aside from that, we've had a long history of cooperation between the hospital and the city, EMS, police, Board of Health, most recently partners in the Ontario Health Team. So this valued and close relationship has really borne fruit for both of us over the past year, as we've both been challenged like no other time with COVID-19. And for instance, I remember when I joined the hospital last April, as a new CEO, and Veronica Nelson was so passionate about sourcing PPE from all over the world. At the time, nobody had any. And not only did we have that here for us, but, shared it, for instance, with the EMS partners. So just an example of our great relationship. And at the Ross, our vision of exceptional care has never been more in the spotlight. And all these pictures that are on your slide with us in the times of COVID really shows us that. We know about the necessity of connecting our hospital with community partners and with the city of Kawartha Lakes. And over the next few years, it's our plan to transform the patient experience at the Ross and the working lives of our valued professionals as we replace life-saving equipment and prepare for the future of healthcare and our future for community growth. And let's move right to the next slide, please. So the Ross is not only a healthcare partner, but an economic partner to the city of Kawartha Lakes. We employ about 820 people directly at the Ross, and that equates to roughly 700 full-time equivalent jobs here at Ross. And then you can add 573 indirect jobs. Those are related to business volumes generated by the hospital. For example, as we spend our money, hospital employees in the retail sector, teachers, public safety, accounting, financial, lawyers, other professional services that we spend money on in the city of Kawartha Lakes. So all of that, about 1,273 full-time jobs. And the hospital, as you know, is one of the 3 largest public sector employers in the city. Our budget is about $102 million. Fully 70 to 75% of that is salaries and wages. And hospital employees largely spend our money here in the city of Kawartha Lakes. So on top of that money is also the 153.7 million roughly in that related economic activity as we spend our dollars within the city. The hospital also contributes almost 54 million in government revenue to governments at all tiers. So federal income tax, corporate tax, provincial income tax, and property taxes here at the local municipal level, not only for the hospital, but for those of us that live and work in the city of Kawartha Lakes. Next slide, please. If I can get the next slide, that would be great. And the city itself, you've done a remarkable job of preparing for the next several years of community growth. And I think it's well known now that the city of Kawartha Lakes is a real gem. And it's a popular place to move to, close to the GTA, and yet a real playground. We know that there are about 200 subdivisions planned in the area, and that new families are moving from the GTA, which is great for the hospital as we have to recruit new people all the time. It's a real magnet here to CKL. At the same time, we have a higher proportion of seniors than other areas of the province, and we're also a very popular destination for people making early retirements. We've long known that the population grows in summer to 20-25%, and over the past winter, we saw the winter population grow. So as people are enjoying their second homes here and technology allows people to work remotely, this area is just going to see increases in economic activity. And then, another example, there's about 200,000 square feet of commercial, industrial, and institutional development happening. All of that is so positive. At the same time, healthcare workers are getting older, I should know. And locally, we will probably see 25 to 30% of people being eligible to retire in the next 5 years or so. And there's fierce competition for skilled healthcare workers. We're really lucky to be close to Peterborough, close to Oshawa, but at the same time, healthcare staff are very mobile, and being close to those 2 larger centers creates some fierce competition for a hospital of our size, trying to attract the best and brightest talent to work here at the hospital. Next slide, please. So I'm really pleased now on my last slide to share 3 big pieces of work that we're doing to transform our hospital and prepare us for the future. And the first is the most exciting. In partnership with 6 other hospitals in the Eastern area, we have been working for about a year and a half, 2 years, to implement a new clinical information system called Epic. We will go live with that in December. And trust me, all of our efforts every day are put towards implementing Epic. It will help us attract and retain those valuable physicians and healthcare workers. As young people come out of school, no one's interested in working in a paper-based environment anymore. So to keep attracting people, we need tools like Epic. All things attached, such as the CT, the MR, IV pumps, integrate seamlessly with this clinical system. So tests, procedures, things are uploaded to Epic in real time. And no more do people have to chase a paper chart and write little notes on a piece of paper and then try to remember to put stuff in the chart, when everything will be integrated seamlessly with the Epic information system. So not only will clinicians here have access to that data, but when we transfer patients to a larger tertiary center such as Peterborough, clinicians there will see that patient's test results, imaging, reports in Epic in real time. So patients won't have to tell their story, tests won't have to be repeated, reduction in potential for medical errors. So very important tool for clinicians. And for patients, and we all want to see data now, we're all consumers, patients will be able to access their chart, their notes, their diagnostics from the comfort of their home through a portion of this new Epic system. So it's really a transformational piece of work here for us at the hospital. I can't stress that enough. In a minute, Dr. Voros is going to share more with you about CT and MR. But we do about 75,000 diagnostic imaging tests every year. And as technology evolves, there will be just more potential to do more things with that. Our CT and MR need to be replaced. They're at the end of life. And new technologies in both of these modalities allow clinicians to do things with greater precision in less time and with less radiation for the patients, which is really very positive. And again, these modalities are seamlessly connected now to the patient's chart through Epic. A third pillar of this plan is investing in other medical equipment upgrades. We have a $1 million investment planned into IV pumps. And again, those pumps will be integrated with the patient chart in real time. So a much better potential to avoid medication errors, to detect potential issues with medication interactions, with correct dosages, a lot of fail-safes built into smart pumps and the integration with the Epic system. So in conclusion, it's a really exciting time for us here at the hospital. And now I'm pleased that Dr. Mario Voros, our Chief of Radiology, will share some more specific information about MR and CT. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I hope everybody can hear me well. Thank you very much, Kelly, for the kind introduction. So yes, my name is Mario Voros and I'm the Chief Radiologist. And I wanted to thank you all for inviting me to speak to you this afternoon. I've been working at the hospital for the last 16 years, since 2005. And over that time, I've seen a lot of transformative change happen at the Ross Memorial Hospital. Today, I'm here to talk to you about some of the exciting things happening at the hospital, and namely that having to do with the new CT scanner that has just recently been installed and is already scanning patients. Now, as most of you probably are already aware, CT scanning involves the use of X-rays, and it generates images of the human body. The CT scanner acquires these images in an axial fashion and creates complex sort of multi-planar reformatted images and 3D volume rendered images of the body. The axial images are obtained in a similar fashion to the way a loaf of bread is cut at the local bakery or grocery store. Now, the CT scanner is a very powerful, extremely powerful piece of machinery. It's fast, it's accurate. It can scan the entire human body in less than 7 or 8 seconds. and is also capable of imaging or visualizing structures that are 1 millimeter or less in size. So this includes tiny little aneurysms in people's brains if they happen to be unlucky enough to have those, or it can image the tiny little bones in the back of the ear that are responsible for hearing, which can be 1, 2, 3 millimeters in size. With the few minutes that I have, let me begin with a short clinical vignette. As an example, not too many years ago, when a patient presented to the hospital with abdominal pain and potentially a surgical problem, such as an appendicitis or an inflamed appendix, the surgeon would come down to the emergency department. They would take a history, they would do a physical exam, and then they would decide whether they need to operate on the patient or not. Well, these days, things are radically different. Now, what happens today is the emergency doctor makes a preliminary assessment of the patient as they present, and they order a CT scan. The radiologist then interprets that CT scan, and when the surgeon is consulted, the first question usually is, what does the CT scan show? So before the surgeon even sets foot in the building, the radiologist is in action making a diagnosis. Now, this is not meant to be a criticism of our clinical and surgical colleagues, who are exceptionally good. It is simply a testament to how good the imaging technology is. The radiologist triages the patients. They determine whether the patient is referred to surgery, whether they are admitted to the hospital for non-surgical care, or whether they are discharged home, or whether they can be safely discharged home. Let me just put it that in those terms. So we can do this because imaging with CT scans is so precise, is so accurate, and so reliable. This is now the standard of care everywhere. Some facts for your consumption. The 4 leading causes of death in Canada are as follows. Cancer is number 1, then heart disease, then accidents, and then cerebrovascular disease such as stroke. That's approximately 160,000 deaths in Canada per year. Now you may ask yourself, what role does a CT scanner or CT technology have to do with any of these leading causes of death? Well, my answer to you is the following. It's one word, everything. I would like to deal with these in some general terms by giving you some concrete examples. So consider the following. I will take these one by one, and I'll try to be quick. I know time is valuable. So cancer is the leading cause of death. So to begin with, cancer, if you think of any and every cancer that afflicts the human body, the CT scan plays an integral role in the diagnosis of that cancer, in the staging of that cancer, and restaging of these cancers. Now, some of the more common cancers include the following, things like breast cancer, lung cancer, lymphoma and leukemia, pancreas, kidney cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, skin cancer, melanoma. This list, of course, is not inclusive of all cancers, but virtually, and I can't emphasize this enough, virtually every cancer you can think of, the CT scanner is involved in the treatment paradigm of these patients. Now, surgeons rely on these images and on imagers like myself to basically tell them where the cancer is in the body. Surgeons and oncologists, who are the doctors who treat patients with chemotherapy or radiation therapy, rely on us, the radiologists, to tell them whether the cancer is confined regionally or whether it has spread to more distant sites. This determines the overall treatment plan for the patient and subsequently the prognosis and overall survival of patients. Most of the time, the patients get their imaging done at their home hospital, such as the Ross Memorial Hospital. They see their oncologist either in Peterborough or sometimes in Toronto. And in the COVID era, sometimes they see them virtually from their own home. So hence the importance of having high quality CT imaging capabilities performed here in Lindsay. After the patients have had their surgery and they are being treated by the medical or the radiation oncologists, the radiologist and the tools that they use, specifically CT scanning, tell these clinicians whether the treatments are working or not, okay? We have to inform these oncologists, these doctors, whether the cancers that they're treating are in remission or whether they are progressing. So that has to do with the first point that I wanted to make about cancers. The next point I wanted to make is accidents. Now, accidents happen. As an example, a resident of the city of Kawartha Lakes gets into an accident, car accident in Lindsay, or perhaps they're on their way to the cottage. If the accident is serious enough, the patient will be brought back to the hospital. And the first thing that will happen is that they will get their imaging in the DI department by way of the CT scanner. Okay, the scanner tells the presence of any injuries and how severe these injuries are. It will determine the scanner, the CT scanner, obviously with the radiologist interpreting the images, will determine whether the patients can be treated at our local hospital or whether they can, or whether they have to be sent to a trauma center like Sunnybrook in Toronto, for example. Now I would like to talk about heart disease and cerebrovascular disease together. And this is because they essentially represent the same disease process. Together, combined, they account for approximately 66,000 deaths in Canada each year. Now you may ask yourself, well, what does a CT scan have to do with, or what kind of a role does a CT scan play in these disease processes? Well, the simple answer is it plays a significant role. In the context of heart disease, the CT scanner can be used either as a screening modality for a primary preventive role, or in the context of cerebrovascular disease, it has a very important and critical role to play in the acute setting in the hospital. Now, if we can just go back to the slides, that was my preamble to the slides. I have 3 slides and I will get to them in order as they appear. So if we could just please move back to the first slide. Thank you very much. So consider the following slides, which I'm about to show you. This is the first slide. This has to do with coronary artery calcium scoring in patients who are asymptomatic. So these are patients who do not have any symptoms. And the conventional medical teaching is as follows, and this is, when I learned this, this was kind of striking and eye-opening for me. In 1/3 of patients, the first sign of coronary artery disease is death. That is the first symptom. In 1/3 of patients, the first symptom of coronary artery disease is death. That's why I emphasize that, because it's so striking. Now, the CT scanner has the power to prevent unnecessary deaths by stratifying a patient's risk. The picture on your left-hand side, I'm finally getting to the picture, so thank you for bearing with me. The picture on the left-hand side shows a coronary calcium score. In the middle of the picture is the heart, this can be performed on an outpatient basis. And what this basically does is it measures the amount of calcified plaque, and the calcified plaque you see as these white little dots in those pictures. This measures the amount of calcified plaque in the person's coronary arteries. And why is that important? It's important because the amount of calcified plaque is actually a surrogate for the overall plaque burden of the patient. So when combined with the patient's other risk factors, and those risk factors can be anything from family history, personal history of hypertension, high blood pressure, or elevated cholesterol, all of these things we've heard about before, their age, their sex, their ethnicity, the calcium score is integral in providing a patient with an overall 10-year risk of future events. And these future events include heart attacks and death. So it is a very, very powerful tool to predict the future by stratifying risk. So the picture on the right-hand side merely shows a calculator that can be used by a family doctor or a cardiologist to basically put in all these risk factors along with the calcium score. And that basically allows them to generate an overall risk stratification. And what this allows is for the primary care physician or cardiologist to taper or specifically target their preventative treatments in treating their patients. And that is, they want to make sure that they're not under-treating patients or they're not over-treating patients. And the calcium CT score is an integral part of that overall treatment paradigm. Next slide, please. So the next slide I'd like to show you is it has to do with the imaging of the heart. However, these slides that I'm showing you has to do with those patients who already are symptomatic, have symptoms, or may have had symptoms in the past. And what I mean by that is the image on your left is a 3D volume rendered image of the heart. And it basically shows somebody who's undergone a bypass graft. So we've all heard of people who've had a CABG, for lack of a better term, is the acronym that we use. And that's basically a bypass of somebody who's had a previous heart attack. And what the CT scan is capable of doing is telling the referring cardiologists and doctors whether these grafted arteries or veins are actually doing their job, whether they're patent or whether they're open or not. The image on the right-hand side, on the other hand, is a picture of the coronary arteries with some contrast material inside. And that's why they appear bright, because they have iodine contrast material inside of them and they appear as bright. And what this tells us in a non-invasive manner, And that's very important because CT scanning is a non-invasive tool. There's no risk associated with that. It tells us the amount of blockage that a patient may have in their coronary arteries. And that's what the yellow arrows basically indicate, is that those are plaques that are narrowing the coronary arteries and essentially are leading the patient to increased risk of a future heart attack. So the greater the blockage, the higher the risk of the patient having a heart attack and potentially succumbing or having, resulting in death. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and basically I'll just talk briefly about what these pictures mean. While we're not a stroke center here at the Ross Hospital, we do a lot of stroke imaging for patients in our emergency department. And as you can imagine, a patient having a stroke, it's very serious business. It entails very serious morbidity and mortality for the patient, depending on the severity of the stroke. Some strokes can be minor, some strokes can be catastrophic and fatal. The images from the CT scanner at the Ross help us to determine the disposition of the patient who's presenting with stroke-like symptoms to the emergency department. Now, either the patient can get life-saving therapy locally at the hospital, or they may need to be transferred to a more specialized center like Toronto, like the Toronto Western, for example, where they receive more invasive treatments. Now, these images are acquired very quickly, and they can be sent to distant hospitals such as Toronto and Western Hospital or Toronto General, wherever the patient ends up. And these images can be literally sent within seconds or minutes after they're completed. Now, the image on your left shows a series of pictures of a patient's brain. Now, these highlight a linear structure with the little arrows there that would appear as bright, and that's actually a clot. It's an acute clot in somebody's brain, and it's blocking one of the major arteries called the MCA in the brain. And the other picture towards the right of that linear structure, you can actually see two other small arrows, which basically indicate an absence of vessels, meaning those vessels are occluded, they're blocked, so they're not visible on that part of the brain, compared to the other side of the brain where you can see all those squiggly lines, which basically indicate those vessels being patent or open. The pictures on the right, on the other hand, the nice colored pictures, these are called color maps, and we generate these from will generate these from our stroke series protocol. And basically, these are the end result of computational algorithms that are performed by the scanner and the software technology built into the scanner. And basically, they indicate the area of the brain that is already infarcted or dead. That's called the ischemic core. And that's the smaller area denoted by the arrows, which point to the blue area. And it also, more importantly, highlights an area, a larger area surrounding that smaller area, which is the brain that is considered to be at risk, meaning that if something is not done, that area at risk, which is called the penumbra, if nothing is done very quickly, then that brain too will succumb to an infarct. So this is the reason we have that adage in medicine that time is brain. Imaging needs to happen, especially for stroke imaging. It needs to happen right away, and treatments need to be initiated right away. There's not a second to lose. So with the scanner technology currently in place at the Ross, the patient can be appropriately stratified for proper treatment. The end result being much quicker access to targeted medical treatments and consequently improved quality of life as a result. This would not be possible without the current CT scanner technology. So just bear with me, I'm almost done. With these examples as background, just how busy are we in the CT department here at the hospital? Keep in mind, the CT scanner operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days of the year. There are no days off. The CT scanner is the workhorse of the department. Here's a listing of some of the numbers just to let you understand the scope of our practice. So we scan approximately 50 or 60 patients per day, Monday to Friday. We perform approximately 15 to 20 examinations each Saturday, each Sunday throughout the year. We performed approximately 12,000 CT scans last year. And as a background, we performed approximately 10,000 5 years ago and approximately 8,300 10 years ago. So based on those numbers, you can see that we're performing approximately 45% more cases than we did just 10 years ago. So the numbers are increasing every year, almost exponentially. And they will continue to increase if past experience is any indicator of future trends. Why are we this busy? The answer is quite simple. The CT scanner is a very powerful and reliable tool which enables other physicians to do their jobs to the best of their abilities. The technology is essentially a victim of its own success. Demand and consumption is driven by increase on both sides of the diagnostic equation. We as imagers can do more and more because we see more and more. The clinicians receiving these reports and the images that they see rely on them to make appropriate decisions for patients' medical care. As an added benefit, and Kelly touched upon this earlier, with the emergence of machine learning and artificial intelligence, which we hear a lot about, especially in my specialty, the new CT equipment is designed to provide the same or even improved diagnostic image quality without a dose penalty. A lot of times we're actually scanning patients with lower dose. So meaning we get better image quality, we get better images at a lower dose, therefore less of a danger to patients. Other factors that drive demand, I'm sorry to say, are sometimes litigious reasons. And for example, there are sometimes adverse results that are related to patient care when imaging was not performed. And the obvious question that oftentimes needs to be answered is, quote unquote, why doctor did you not order a CT scan? That would have helped make the diagnosis. So that's one of the reasons why imaging is growing every year, because of these kind of factors. In fact, I've heard from some of my colleagues in the emergency department that patients quite routinely demand having a CT scan because they feel that that's part of their care, and that's going to make the diagnosis come quicker or more accurate. Furthermore, new doctors are trained on this new technology, and they expect it as part of their toolbox when they're diagnosing and treating patients. So on the subject of new doctors, new CT scanner technology is an integral part. The CT scanner technology is integral in being able to recruit, and this is important, in being able to recruit and retain new and highly trained physicians to the area of Kawartha Lakes. After all, these doctors train on this type of equipment in larger academic centers, and they expect to have access to such equipment when they come to work in our communities. So that's another very important reason why we're here today, or at least why I'm here today. So in summary, I hope I've convinced you of the importance and critical and central role of how a CT scanner plays, the critical and central role that a CT scanner plays, not only in the diagnostic imaging department, but also in the hospital and the community as a whole. So in my opinion, my humble opinion, medical imaging is one of the pillars of modern day medicine. And in turn, the CT scanner is the cornerstone of the hospital medical imaging department. So thank you for your time. And I'm happy to answer any questions if now or later on.
I think we'll just continue with the presentation if that's okay, and we'll see if there's any questions at the end, because it looks like you're almost there. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We've been through a year where technology has played such an important role in all of our lives. And of course, this is true for this moment in healthcare. To date, we have raised more than $5 million from the community for these priority projects, demonstrating substantial support from residents and grateful patients. The community is behind us, but we can achieve so much more with the city's involvement. Support from the city will inspire others to give. Because provincial funding doesn't cover costs of new and replacement equipment and technology, hospitals and municipalities are working together to deliver critical projects that meet the needs of their communities. Municipal support is increasingly common and funds healthcare projects that are critical to the community. Approximately 68% of campaigns across the province include municipal support, and municipalities are funding between 10 to 50% of project costs. Projects in smaller communities have a larger proportion of municipal support relative to total goal, and we're seeing regions that are experiencing higher growth are more likely to commit significant funds for hospitals through tax levies and other means. Municipal funding stimulates community giving, and it shows confidence to the community. The examples here, municipality of Prince Edward County, Wellington County, and Simcoe County, have recently supported hospital projects in the range of 25 to 43%. Northumberland County is currently considering a request for $10 million from the 2 hospitals in their catchment area, Northumberland Hills and Campbellford Memorial. Next slide, please. Our population is rapidly expanding, and we need to remain competitive with other cities who are investing in their local hospitals. The pandemic has shown the urgency of accelerating both technology and other tools, such as the ones that Dr. Voros indicated, for more connected healthcare in City of Kawartha Lakes as well as throughout the region. The province does not fund equipment, and thus we respectfully request Council consider the information and the hospital's request for financial support during the upcoming 2022 budget deliberations. Thank you, and I think at this point we'd be happy to take questions if there are any.
Well, thank you very much all for your presentation. Very interesting. I'm just going to ask Council for a motion to receive the presentation and the correspondence that was in our package, and then we'll see if there's any questions. So moved by Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Dunn. Any questions for any of the presenters today? Councillor Dunn, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Aaron. My question is always how much? I like numbers. Don't be shy, but I just need something to work on. That's all.
That's very understandable, and we would love to continue that conversation during the budget deliberations and even in preparation for that. So as an example, 19 years ago, when the city very generously supported the capital expansion, it was 40% of the local share. And so 40% of a project such as this would be 7.5 million or $37.46 per household. Just as an illustrative point, over the 5 years would be 50%, and 40%, would pare that down similarly.
You'd be looking at funding over a gross amount paid for by the city over a 5-year period, then basically.
Ideally, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Helmsley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it always comes back to the money, and I guess the disappointment that senior levels of government, although they commit to healthcare, seem to look the other way when these things occur. But I did want to suggest to you that we do, with yourselves, share some funding things. For instance, the doctor recruitment program is shared between Ross Memorial and the City of Kawartha Lakes. Also, over the last year, the paramedics ran a program where they followed up with mostly senior patients who would have been released from the hospital, but needed some ongoing care in terms of ensuring that their medication was taken and that they were eating properly and that they were doing okay after their release. And council, of course, pledged some funds towards that. So I think we have been ongoing in our support of Ross Memorial and of our citizenry, and I think that should continue. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you want a motion at this point or not, but I would suggest that a motion that staff bring back as a decision unit for the 2022 budget a way of providing a level of support for this program might be appropriate, if you agree.
I do agree. Let's do that as a follow-up motion, if you can, Councillor. We'll just got a motion to receive right now, And then I think that's an appropriate follow-up motion. Then staff can put together some different ideas and funding sources and some different levels, and we can have a more warranted discussion at that time. So thank you. I'll come back to you as a follow-up motion if that's okay. Any further questions on the presentation? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly and then Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the deputies today, for Kelly, Mario, and Aaron for your presentation today. I was it's a pleasure being on council when this came to us some 19 years ago, and we had a very open and vigorous debate at that time. And when you're making such a long-term commitment over a couple terms of council, we had to give careful consideration, and it was determined at that time that it was a very worthwhile project. So I certainly look forward to the debate this fall, and I know the Ross is a very important part of our community as a growing community, and for the services provided. And we also have to keep our technology certainly in line with what's happening around the province, and our physicians and our citizenry certainly expect no less. So look forward to the debate in the fall in our budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ashmore, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've certainly enjoyed my time on the Board of Governors of the Ross Memorial Hospital. It's been quite a learning experience. Certainly gives you appreciation of what goes on in there and what they have to deal with, especially the funding. It's dependent. They will not fund equipment, very little, and we have to raise it locally, which seems quite ironic as we preach to everybody that we're, it's the healthcare system is totally government funded. Well, it's not. It's not true, but through the hard work of the foundation, certainly we get this equipment. I just had a question to Dr. Boros. As of now in the province of Ontario, there's approximately 500,000 people who are waiting on a list of their surgeries and treatments. Now, you've certainly done your job in getting the treatments. So you gave the example of the CT scanner and what the volume is you're putting through, and you're getting really quick results, and referrals are going through really quick, which is great. But that's all fine and dandy, but what happens when they have to wait for several months and a year to get their treatment, which the diagnosis has been that you do your diagnosis, you and your team. I suppose that's the frustrating part. You can't, help the patient further down because they've been diagnosed and they have to wait, a year or 2 years to get their surgery. What's your thoughts on that? I know it's kind of a difficult question to answer, but how are we going to work around that in the next while to alleviate this backlog?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button there. That's a very, very good, valid question, and you're absolutely correct. We're always chasing to try to get caught up, and COVID certainly hasn't helped that. On top of that, you may or may not be aware, we're also, not only did our scanner go down here, but we also are replacing the scanners in Peterborough, which puts an added strain on not only this community, but Peterborough. And so overall, the volumes had to go down because of that. The best way I can answer your question is we do a number of things to compensate. The department is staffed by exceptionally good physicians and personnel, technologists, and the administration is very responsive to these kind of needs. So they try to put in extra hours when they can to catch up on scanning. We try to be as efficient as we can with the patients that we put through the department. And then also we try to stratify or prioritize the patients that need to be scanned. So as an example, those patients who have cancer, who need the imaging studies for their treatments and their follow-up, we generally put as first. So we do not want to negatively impact their treatments. So those would generally go first, and then we take it from there. As you would imagine, we scan not just cancer patients, as I mentioned, emergency patients, but we also do imaging for a lot of chronic illnesses. So Not that that is any more or less important, but the reality is we have to prioritize. And some of the patients with maybe perhaps the chronic illnesses then have to be put lower on the urgency scale, because there's only so many machines we have and so much funding we have to put through the patients through the scanner. So we generally go through this with our technologists. We look at the requisitions. We prioritize studies that we feel need to be done. We obviously are in contact with the referring physicians. If somebody calls me and says, this patient is going to be seen tomorrow, I need the scan today, it gets done. So those are the measures that we undertake to, to make the best out of a difficult situation like you alluded to. And there will be a big catch up. There's no question. I mean, as you already alluded to, because of the different shutdowns, surgery was shut down. So now it's going to be basically a tsunami, which has happened in the first wave, actually, because imaging took a big dip during the first wave, and then we were playing catch up. And to a certain extent, we're still playing catch up. And then the second wave. So, things are a work in progress, and it's going to be a strain. It'll definitely be a strain on the department, and not just our department, but everywhere. So it's a very valid concern, and I suppose a lot of institutions will have to have their unique processes and plans in place to be able to accommodate the volumes, the increased surging volumes. So that's basically an example of how we deal with things. So we have to prioritize, and that's how we allocate the scans to patients. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Councillor Dunn, for a follow-up. Any other questions from anybody else? Okay, Councillor Dunn, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to encourage the Ross to get your numbers in as quickly as possible, because based on prior experience, we won't raise all this money by special levy, because we won't, and we're always conscious of the taxpayer, and we'll raise some of this money through special levy, and we'll raise some of this money by reevaluating our own priorities and putting them off for a year or two or three, because that's the way the business works. So the sooner you get them in before staff and council starts to make spending decisions, I think the better and easier it's going to be for council to deal with the problem.
Good advice. Thank you. Any further questions for the presenters? Okay, we have a motion to receive the correspondence and the presentation. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you very much. We're going to do a follow-up motion. I believe, Councillor Elmsley, you'll move that the hospital's request for financial support be forwarded to council as a decision unit for the upcoming 2022 budget deliberations. Does that work?
That's correct. Yes, that's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Elmsley. Can I get a second? Councillor Vale, any questions on that follow-up motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's passed. Thanks, folks. Thank you for sharing your concerns with us and your ask, and we will see what we can do. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move down to our second presentation is item 6.2 from the Eastern Ontario Regional Network and Rogers. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Pine to do whatever introduction he needs to make. Jim Pine is from the Eastern Ontario Regional Network and is the Indigenous Lead and Government Relations Specialist. Welcome, Mr. Pine. I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Latham, and thank you very much, members of council, for the opportunity to speak to you today. And a special thank you again to Mayor Latham, who last year was the past chair, or this year, I should say, is the past chair of the EOWC and continues to be a big player regionally for the city with the EOWC. My part today is a small one, and I'm sure you'll be happy about that, Mayor Latham. But we have speakers today from our partners, Rogers Communication, Marnie Miron, who's the Director of Service Expansion, and Luis Ortega, who's the Senior Program Manager for Service Expansion at Rogers as well. And speaking for EORN when it comes to the CEL project will be Lisa Severson, the Director of Communications, and also joining us in observation today are two members of our comms team, Marco Schmitz and Heather Wrightley. So I will kick this off if I can with the next slide. Just a idea of what we're going to be speaking to you about today. A very brief update on EORN's proposed GIG project, a little bit about funding streams from the federal and provincial government, and then we'll get into the main event, which is the EORN Cell Gap project. And I'm going to turn my video off if that's okay. We're getting some big thunderstorms through here, so I'll just try to minimize my broadband need if that's okay. So we'll go to the next slide. So the GIG project, you've heard us, I think, speak a little bit about this proposal that's sitting before the federal and provincial governments as we speak to you today. And just a quick reminder about what the project is. We could go to the next slide. It really is another EORN public-private partnership proposal. It would deliver up to 1,000 megabits of speed or a gig of speed to more than 95% of what we call the demand area. And I'll show you a slide in just a second. But really, we're talking about trying to put a piece of fiber optic cable to more than 540,000 premises, as we call it. That's homes or businesses, seasonal cottages, institutions. We think this is the best technology that will serve us for the very long term, that piece of fiber optic cable. It certainly delivers a lot more than the minimum that the CRTC says Canadians should expect at 50 megabits down, 10 megabits up. And we think there's a good reason to do this because it is future proof and fixes it for a generation. And it is a problem for Eastern Ontario, as you know very well. We have a lot of unserved and underserved households and businesses across Eastern Ontario. In fact, across the province, we have the largest share of unserved and underserved at about 220,000 actual locations, the province tells us. So EORN's East Ontario's got a real problem and we need to fix it. And we think this would fix it for the very long term. Next slide. This is what we call the demand area. EORN has spent a considerable amount of time engineering and mapping all of the premises, whether that's an institution like a doctor's office or a home or a cottage around Eastern Ontario to figure out where demand for bandwidth would come from, because that's the places we need to serve. So this map shows you the extent of the project that we need to do. The pink area represents demand for a gig, and the green area just represents where Canada tells us that you could get the minimum right now at 5010, the CRTC minimum. So what the slide really shows you that even at the low end, at the 5010, there's a lot of work to be done. And that's what our proposal is designed to do, is to lift everybody to that gig status for the long term. Next slide. We've been at it for a little while, like we always do with our projects. We need to do our homework and build the evidence for a proposal. We started a few years ago, and earlier this year in March, actually, we resubmitted our business case and request to both Canada and Ontario for support. And what we're looking for from Canada and Ontario is $200 million contribution each towards the estimated cost of the project, which is about $1.2 billion at the low end. And that's where we think it will end up. So that's our ask, and we're still waiting to hear whether that's going to be successful or not. And if we're not successful, we will have done something really important, we think, by really establishing the standard that people in Eastern Ontario should get in terms of the level of service for their broadband, and that's at that gig level. So we hope that if we're not successful, that whatever the province and the federal governments do, that they will make sure that their money goes towards giving people in Eastern Ontario that gig status. And we'll be watching for that as we go forward. We'll wait to see what they say on the project. Next slide. EORN does homework, as I mentioned before. One of the things we did was, before we got started, was commission 2 independent economic studies to say, is it a good idea to actually build a gig project? Is it worth the effort and worth the money? And both came back with similar kinds of conclusions, with a resounding yes. It would be very good for the region, both for job creation, employment, investment, and people with earnings as we build the project are going to spend it in our communities across Eastern Ontario. That's going to generate some prosperity. It proposes to raise some additional property tax revenues for municipalities, which is important, of course, for us in our business. And importantly, and we've just selected a few highlights here, importantly, it says to the federal and provincial governments, if you invest your $200 million each, you can get your money back in 5 years through increased taxation that you will generate as a result of growing the regional economy. So it's a good deal, we say, for both Ontario and Canada to get their money back in a short 5 years. And we think that should be attractive for them going forward. But there's other benefits like reducing healthcare costs, just based on your last presentation with the hospital. One of the economists said that we could drive down healthcare costs in delivery costs in Eastern Ontario about $170 million a year through better connectivity. So there's that kind of benefit from a project like this as well. Next slide. As I mentioned, it's about $1 billion to do all of the work from our Ontario's participation. We also see a role for the Infrastructure Bank of Canada at about $400 million, and then we'd raise the rest from the private sector. And that's what EORN does through their projects. And just a point to say that we know that $400 million from the federal and provincial governments together is a lot of money. But in the scheme of things, when you look at all of the subsidy dollars that are now available for broadband, it represents just 5.7% of that $7 billion. So we think it's a modest ask with a lot of return on that investment for all of us. Next slide. I'll go through these quickly. These are the current funding streams that are available from Ontario and from Canada. Then I'll stop and I could take any questions, Your Honor, if you wish. Next slide. This is the provincial funding programs. I'm sure you're aware of this. Ontario has its own ICON program, Improving Connectivity for Ontario. With their additional $150 million announced last fall, it brings their available subsidies for that program to $350 million. And then they made a very significant decision to invest much more in infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, in their last budget this spring, about $2.8 billion more. So, you know, the provincial government needs a pat on the back for sure for stepping up, I think, in a big way for putting money forward for subsidy to improve the broadband infrastructure. How they're going to use that money is what we're waiting to hear, of course. But kudos to them for making that large commitment. The next slide is the federal money. And you've heard about the Universal Broadband Fund. When it was announced, it was $1.7 billion across Canada. In this past budget, the federal government increased that by $1 billion to about 2.75 in total, and that's where our dollars come from in terms of subsidy available. Again, either of those programs and both of them represent a source of funding that we think the federal and provincial governments could take their $200 million share and support the GIG project. And I'll stop there. As I said, we're waiting to hear whether either government's going to support our proposal. We hope they do, but we'll just have to wait and see. And I want to thank you, all of you, for your continued support and advocacy of EORN, and particularly the GIG project, because I know that you've been supportive of that effort. So if there are any questions, Mr. Mayor, I could take it now, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Severson, which is the main event, as I said. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I think that's appropriate. If before we go over to the cell gap, are there any quick questions on the GIG proposal or what Jim has presented? I see a couple there. Councillor Elmsley and then Dunn. Go ahead, Councillor Elmsley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Mr. Pine, for your presentation. I was just curious, with the money that's been announced from the feds and from the province, it seems like there's enough money there to fund the whole 1.2 billion. So I'm wondering, are we just waiting to see how they plan on spending the money, or is that money actually committed money to this project? And what do the numbers actually mean? Sorry to be a little vague.
No, they're very good questions. Well, neither government has committed any of their $200 million, our ask of $200 million each, to the project yet. There is substantial amount of subsidy money available. Of course, part of what EORN does is tries to minimize the amount of public dollars that need to go into build infrastructure. That's why we like this public-private partnership approach. we try to bring the private sector into the project. When we put municipal money, provincial and federal money together, we can leverage a lot of private sector money. So we try our best to minimize, taxpayer contributions and maximize private sector contributions. And that's just the way we do the business at EORN. But we are waiting to see whether Canada and Ontario will support the program. There's certainly money available to do that. It's just whether or not they decide doing an EORN project is the way they want to tackle it in our region.
Thank you. Keep in mind, I would just add, Councillor Elmsley, that it sounds like a lot of money from a federal perspective, but that's to cover all of Canada. So, it's a pretty extensive project for Eastern Ontario, but those monies, sometimes sound like a lot, but when you spread it over an entire country, it doesn't go very far. So, great question. Thank you. Councillor Dunn, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. So this funding, when you make your ask, are you going to be asking for it over a multi-year period? Like, say on the $200,000, $200 million, $40 million a year for 5 years, or is it one big ask, or do you?
Again, that's a really good question, Councillor Dunn. The project is scheduled to be done over 5 years of construction, and it's based on as the construction is going and paying for the cost. So we don't get the money up front. It's all done on the basis of invoicing back to the province or the federal government. So they don't have to put it all out at once. It's over a period of about 5 years.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions for Jim on the gig portion? Seeing none. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. I'll let you turn it over and make the introductions for the cell gap. Go ahead.
Sure. I'd like to turn it over to Lisa Severson now, who's going to lead the EORN portion of it, and then we'll move into Marnie and Louise from Rogers. So, Lisa.
Thanks very much, Jim, and through you, Mayor Letham. I would personally like to thank the City of Kawartha Lakes for its support over the last 12 years. It's hard to believe sometimes that we've been at this for this long, but you've always been one of our biggest supporters, and we at EORN are very thankful for that. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. My apologies, I too have not very good broadband, so that's why I'm keeping my video off. So a little bit of a timeline around the cell project. As many of you know, EORN worked for many years to make this project happen. And in 2014, the EOWC was asked by the MPs and MPPs to fix the issues in the cellular networks in Eastern Ontario. One of their biggest complaints is when they would travel from their home constituency offices back to the legislature, they experienced dropped calls and gaps in service when they were trying to work. The EOWC then asked EORN to do an analysis of the problem in our region, and in 2017, a detailed analysis and business case was completed, and it was submitted to both the federal and provincial governments. It took 2 years of advocacy for the federal and provincial governments to finally approve the request, and another 8 months to negotiate the transfer payment agreement with the provincial government. So the money flows from the federal government and the federal government's requirements to the province, and we have our contract with the provincial government for the cell project. The agreement was signed in May of 2015 with the provincial government, and we were close enough in April of 2020 that we issued the request for proposals. The RFPs closed September the 3rd, and we had 2 bids. One was from Rogers and one was from Bell. After it took about approximately 3 months to evaluate the submissions, and in late November of that year, the EORN Board of Directors directed staff to enter into contract negotiations with Rogers. We worked really closely with the staff at Rogers, and it took us approximately 3 months to negotiate that contract. And on March 18th, that contract was signed, and the formal launch, which I hope many of you were able to virtually attend, We had over 350 people at the virtual launch. Was held on March 19th, and we were fortunate enough to have the minister at that time, Minister Scott, and Minister Monsef also attend. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the goals for the project are. We have set some very high goals for the project, and we are confident that our partner in Rogers will be able to meet or exceed these goals. EORN created a demand model using MPACT data. So we had to actually purchase the data from MPACT to ensure that we could use the funding that we received in the most effective and efficient manner. Our demand model is based on where people live, people work, and people travel on major roadways. And our goals for the project are to ensure that in 99% of the demand areas, so again, where people live, people work, and people travel on major roadways, they can make or receive calls. And in 95% of that same demand area in the region, they will be able to use standard definition type of services, so to send email, do online banking, check social media, etc. And finally, our last goal is to ensure that at least 85% of that demand area has access to high definition service, and if needed, could do a video call for work, or a student could do schoolwork, attend a class if needed, or a team of EMS folks could use the service to stream video of an incident to a hospital. So that high definition coverage is a major goal, and we know from the submission that Rogers provided that they will meet or exceed that 85% coverage. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the project. There are approximately 300 existing sites in the region that will be upgraded by Rogers with 5G radios, and will be and there are another 300 approximately new towers that will be built through the region. Once duty to consult obligations are met, EORN has been designated that role by the Crown. That's when we can start the new tower builds. The upgrades to the existing towers have already begun, and residents will be seeing improvements in their current levels of service very soon from those towers. And our Rogers team, so Luis and Marnie will go into much more detail on that during their presentation. Our project needs to be completed by July of 2025. And we do have service level agreements in place with Rogers 5 years after the build to ensure that as demand increases, the network capacity is able to maintain the service levels that people need and want. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about the technology in towers and radios that we'll be using. Again, the 300 new sites will be built in 4 years. There is an opportunity on those new sites for possible co-location by other carriers. Of the 300 existing sites currently being upgraded with 5G, at least 80 or more are co-located towers with other carriers. So just so you know, Rogers and EORN will be trying to minimize unneeded builds. In Rogers network, they use Ericsson radios, and which is I think very key in the rollout of the project. And the network and the radios will support both 4G and 5G devices. So many of the new phones that are being released now by Apple and Samsung and Google and all the rest of them, many of them have that 5G chip in them. And so they will start being able to connect to that 5G network. But your phones that you currently have will still work because the technology supports 4G as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about the breakdown. So the federal government has committed to funding up to $71 million. The provincial government as well has agreed to fund up to 71 million. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus members, so there's 13 of those, and 9 of the 10 Eastern Ontario Mayors Caucus have jointly contributed $10 million to the project, and Rogers will be contributing over $150 million to the project, and so the value of the project is worth approximately $300 million, and that is before any in-kind contribution or community benefits are included in those numbers. And EORN's administration costs are projected to be approximately 6% of the total cost of the project. Next slide, please. So this is a map of our region, and the green dots, which may be a bit hard to see, those are the existing towers that Rogers currently has in Eastern Ontario that will be upgraded with the new 5G equipment. We can go, and then again, so you will not see the proposed sites on this map until we go through land use authority, and that will be done through the city of Kawartha Lakes. Once those have been approved and the construction begins, we will be updating this map on a regular basis and sharing it with the members. But right now, and also it's a very competitive business, and the network that is being designed, it's critical that that type of information isn't public until the contracts are finalized between the private landowner and through the LUA process. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what does this mean for the city of Kawartha Lakes? You have contributed approximately $716,000 towards the project as part of the EOWC and EOMC 10 million contribution. And as you know, there will be a need to build towers, as I've stated, throughout the region, which includes your municipality. Again, you will play a key role in the project rolling out as the land use authority approvals are completed, and by working with the Rogers team to make sure that all of the permitting and application processes that are required by you as a municipality are completed efficiently and in a timely manner. EORN is creating a tower siting resource guide. It's being finalized, and we hope to have it out within the next couple of weeks. And we will be sharing that with all municipalities in the very near future. And it will also be posted on our website in the event that you don't have a tower siting process or policy in place. Next slide, please. So this is a map of the city of Kawartha Lakes. Right now, there are 14 existing Rogers towers that will be upgraded with new 5G equipment. And there's 20 to 30 new towers proposed to be built in the city of Kawartha Lakes over the next 4 years. Next slide, please. So EORN is very excited about the benefits this project will bring to not only Kawartha Lakes, but our own, the entire region. We know that Rogers is making a huge investment in both physical infrastructure for the region, and will be building a network that is focused on the future with the 5G technologies. EORN and the funding we received is focused on improvement and expansion of the cell networks in Eastern Ontario. But we know that the new infrastructure and upgrades may allow for possible improvements to broadband to homes and businesses in the region in the future. And I will let the Rogers team talk to that in their presentation. One of the very exciting aspects of this partnership with Rogers is their desire to become a part of the communities they are servicing through the network. They have a number of exciting initiatives that will be rolling out in Eastern Ontario that Louise and Marnie will be speaking to. And I can say when we evaluated both proposals, we were very, very pleased with how invested Rogers becomes in the communities that they choose to build out in. So I think there are some great opportunities ahead for everyone in Eastern Ontario through this partnership. They're not only committed to building a physical network, but to work with communities on building strong social networks as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of, this is just a quick timeline and next steps. So we started the official duty to consult process in January of 2021. Our contract was approved by the EORM board March the 4th. We signed off with Rogers on that contract on March 18th. We had the official launch on March 19th. We're making presentations to all the EOWC members this summer and hope to do so with the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus members in probably the fall. We're hoping that, and we know, and Rogers will speak a bit more to that, there will be in-service launches probably later summer and beginning into fall. Once a cluster of towers, existing towers have been upgraded, there'll be announcements around that. I think if we can save questions, that ends my presentation. If we can save questions until after Rogers does their presentation, some of the questions you may have for me may be answered through that presentation. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to Louise and Marnie.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have the Rogers presentation? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marnie Miron, Director of Service Expansion for Rogers, with a focus on Ontario. My team works at the community level, and our mandate in working with communities is to deliver on all connectivity improvements to get Ontarians connected. So we are discussing the Sail Gap project today, but we would be pleased to come back and discuss broadband plans for the city of Kawartha Lakes. Excuse me. Before we start, I also wanted to share a thank you to the team that has made this work possible, to the support of the city of Kawartha Lakes, and specifically Jim Pine and the EORN team for their partnership and support in enabling such important work for our homes in Eastern Ontario. A little bit about our agenda today. I will start off with some background on Rogers and our involvement in the Sail Gap project, including how we engage with the communities we work within. Next, I'll pass to my colleague, Louise Ortega, who will take you through an overview of the processes for building new cell towers, upgrading our existing sites, and we'll talk in a little more detail about our timeline and the coverage maps for the region. After that, as Lisa mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. I'd like to start by sharing a video, if it's ready to roll.
We are Rogers.
We bring people together.
We connect them to each other
And to the world around them. And that's why we wake up each and every day. To connect Canadians to a world of possibilities
and the memorable moments that matter most to them.
Because connections unite us.
Possibilities fuel us.
and moments define us.
We help turn possibility into reality.
And we believe our people are at the heart of it all.
That success starts with me.
With you.
And with us.
With us.
With us.
With all of us.
We believe our customers always come first.
They inspire everything that we do. We believe in pushing boundaries and the power of new ideas.
We believe in doing what's right
With honesty, transparency.
and integrity.
We believe in helping our communities thrive.
In doing our part to make the world a better place.
We work as one team.
With one vision.
Because we win as one.
Or not at all.
Together.
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 We are Rogers.
We are one team
With one purpose.
One set of values.
Values that honor our past.
And our future.
Together.
will make more possible.
We are Rogers.
Thank you. I wanted to say as well, we're really thrilled to learn that we were chosen to be part of this unique public-private partnership with EORN. We're really committed to eliminating the digital divide in Ontario. This is the province that we call home, and indeed Rogers calls home. Lisa covered the statistics very well, so I won't go into too much detail here. But in summary, Rogers is making $150 million plus investment out of the total $300 million investment, which we are looking to bring services to over 11,000 kilometers of major roadways. As Lisa mentioned, our coverage focus is to capture 99% of the areas where we work, we live, and we travel. And to deliver on this coverage across all 113 municipalities and Indigenous communities, we're looking and expecting at least 300 plus new tower sites, as well as upgrading the existing 300 sites that we have. And lastly, the most important outcome in improving connectivity infrastructure is really long-term employment growth and economic development for communities. We expect to bring more than 3,000 jobs and over 420 million in economic growth to the region. Next slide, please. A vital piece of what we do really goes beyond infrastructure, and we consider it our responsibility to help lift up the communities where we operate, but the communities where we live. The pandemic has really brought this to the forefront, communicating to each other, staying connected, looking after each other and our neighbors, as well as the vitality and sustainability of our local businesses. The first step is really in bridging the digital divide, is also delivering programs that give flexible and affordable options to everyone. A couple of the programs that I'd like to highlight today are Connected for Success. This is high-speed, flexible, and very affordable internet options. And it's designed for those who may be managing on a fixed income or may be receiving income support. So recognizing, well, as we expand broadband to every home, it's equally important that we bring flexible options so families can take advantage of that connectivity. As well as we have a partnership with Women's Shelters Canada. We offer financial aid, but we also offer devices and coverage plans. We recently announced an expansion of this program, reaching over 100 women's shelters in Ontario. Excuse me, including in Lindsay. We were very proud of that. We also have a focus on programs that support and inspire our children, our youth. A couple that are near and dear to my heart. The Ted Rogers Scholarship Fund. We have awarded close to 1,800 scholarships to youth across Canada, and they receive $2,500 per year to support their educational pursuits. As well as Ted Rogers Community Grants. This is provided to organizations making a meaningful difference in the lives of youth. It could be through STEM, innovation, mentorship, and community leadership. We will be actively seeking input from the City of Kawartha Lakes to identify the local organizations that we can support in your region. Lastly, I won't go through the entire slide. I'll highlight one last point, which is where we really see this come to life, is through our Give Together volunteer days. This is a program where Rogers employees come together for 2 full days, and we volunteer in the communities where we live or where we work across Canada. And as a next step to bring this to life, we would work with you and also our employees who live in the city of Kawartha Lakes to ensure we have identified local programs and associations that we can be included in the Give Together program where you would like to encourage volunteerism. This is really a summary of some of the community work that we do, but we look forward to working with you on the programs that mean the most to the residents of the city of Kawartha Lakes. With that, we'll move to the next slide. And thank you for the opportunity to present, and I would like to pass it to my colleague, Luis Ortega. Luis?
Thank you, Marnie. So my name is Luis Ortega, and Senior Program Manager for Service Expansion Major Programs. I'm responsible for the delivery of this program end-to-end. And I'm happy to be here today and have the opportunity to share with you about our technology and our plans for the region. I'd like to start with this slide. As Lisa mentioned, our plans are to upgrade all our existing sites with 5G technology and also implement 5G technology in all the new sites that we plan to build in the region. And I know people may ask, okay, well, what is so good about 5G? So I'd like to provide a little bit of context. If you think about 1G back in the 80s, it allows us to do mobile voice. Then 2G in the 90s gave us the opportunities to do, SMS, email, global roaming. And most recently, when you think about 4G and LTE, the amount of things we can do on our mobiles today, it's impressive, right? We can do banking, we can watch videos, live streaming. There are now applications for ride sharing and so many more that you may think, okay, we have everything we need in the mobile wireless spectrum. But when you think about 5G, we're talking about unprecedented changes. Like the speed is going to be 100 times faster. Capacity is going to be 10 times bigger. We're talking about instant response time, no more waiting time. Reliability is going to be much better, latency, etc. And this enables the communities and the regions where the 5G is deployed with a number of new possibilities. For example, help first responders with fast dedicated networks, enabling farmers with new possibilities using wireless real-time sensors, drones, 5G drones that we can use for emergency medical services, agriculture, infrastructure, etc. So the possibility is endless, right? So we're really happy to be implementing this technology in the region. And we know there might be some concerns about safety. So I want to be clear on that. We comply with all the regulations and the Safety Code 6. We know that this technology is safe. We're happy to work with any of your local areas or municipalities to work and help educate your constituents if needed. I would like to recommend there is a document on the EORN's webpage that speaks about 5G, and it includes references to World Health Organization opinion about 5G, American Cancer Society, etc. So I want to reinforce the message: health and safety of all Canadians is of the utmost importance to us. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in the next 3 slides, I'm going to share with you what is the process that we're going to follow to build new sites, to upgrade sites, and what does it mean in terms of when are these sites going to be ready in my region or in my local area. So I want to start by saying the new site build process is a process that normally takes between 1.5 to 2.5 years. So it's not a quick process. It's something that takes time. And we are at this point in time already working on the steps 1 and 2. We have our site acquisition specialists already in the region, searching for more than 165 of the 300 sites that we plan to install, the new sites. Now, as soon as they find locations that are suitable to the project needs, and they sign the agreements with the landowners, then you will have visibility as part of the land usage authorization process. So we will come to every one of the municipalities and make sure that we understand any potential concern, and we address those concerns until we secure concurrence, right? And then is when we will be able to move along with the rest of the process. So as I said, it's a process that takes 1.5 to 2.5 years, but we are already working on this. On the next slide is the process we will follow for our tower uplifts or upgrades. It's a shorter process in duration. Again, we are already working on this process, and actually we are expecting the first group of upgrades to be live starting in summer. So we already upgraded some, and we will continue to do that during the summer and fall and etc. This is a process that when we need to do work on the tower, if we need to do reinforcement, then it takes a little bit longer than normal. But in general, we're confident we can upgrade our sites in a period that goes between 1 to 2 months if we don't need a lot of reinforcements, but up to 8 months when we need to do some civil work. Next slide, please. So when you put all of that together, what it means in terms of timeline is, as you know, we announced this project back in March 19, 2021. We already started with tower upgrades, and our plan is to finish all those tower uplifts by end of 2022. So the majority of those will be finished this year, and then the rest will finish next year. So by end of 2022, all the existing sites will have 5G technology, which means that if you have a 5G device, then you will experience those benefits right away. And if you don't, you will experience some benefits in terms of additional capacity. Some mobiles will be moving to the 5G network, but you won't experience a significant improvement in coverage. The improvement in coverage quality will come as we densify the network and we implement new sites. And those will really start to materialize. 2023, we plan to have at least 25% of those 300 new sites completed. 2024 is when we think 50%, so by end of 2024, 75% of the build will be ready. And by July 2025, it's gonna be when we finish this project. So we have a mandate to finish by July, end of July 2025. So these are the timelines we are managing today. And we know they are not specific to your local communities or regions. But as Lisa mentioned, as we go through the land authorization, usage authorization process, and we secure sites and locations, then we're happy to come back with updates with more specific dates and location for the different municipalities. Next, please. So this is how the network looks like today. All of these are our Rogers site, as Lisa alluded to. In city of Kawartha Lakes, we have 14 sites, and we plan to install 20 to 30 new sites. So basically, more than doubling our existing footprint. And by the end of the project, next slide, please. This is what 99% voice coverage would look like. So this is based on the demand area that was defined by E.ON, and we're confident we will fulfill or exceed the 99% SLA for voice calls, 95% for standard definition, and 85% for high definition in the whole area. the way we're going to prove this is through measurements. We will have KPIs that we will measure regularly, and through drive tests. So we will have teams that will have to go and drive through all those routes often, and we will collect the measurements and discuss the results with E.ON until we prove that we have secured those SLA levels. Next, please. So before I finish my presentation, these are some questions that we have received in different opportunities, and we thought it would be a good idea to address proactively. The first one is, do I need to switch my cell phone provider to Rogers? And the answer is that we will be delighted to have all of you as our customers. But as we build this network, our competitors, and I don't know their plans, but they will have the option to co-locate in our towers. And ultimately, we can also, we can have roaming agreements with them that can allow you to take benefit of the network. So the answer is no, you don't need to, but we will be delighted if you choose to do so. The next question is also one that I understand it's important for the region. It's about broadband. Is this project gonna help me with my internet broadband problems? And the answer is, well, this is really a project to improve the wireless coverage. But as we deploy the network and as we are able to densify the network and implement 5G, there might be opportunities for specific rural areas to deploy mobile broadband solutions where fiber optic is not an option. So the answer is not in the short term, most likely not in the short term, but as we densify the network, there might be opportunities. But again, it's not the main scope of the project. When will the towers in my area be built? I think I covered that. Most of the towers will come live 2023 and beyond, the new ones. How many towers? Well, we explained that as well. 20 to 30 new towers will be part of Kawartha Lakes. And the next one is another one that I really like. Since we started this project, there has been a number of landlords interested in offering land for us to place our towers, and it wasn't clear who they need to contact. Well, now we have a resource on the E.ON web page where they can click and submit the details and the details of the property, and then our real estate specialist will contact them and make sure to do the assessment. And if the location is suitable for our needs, then we will for sure try to secure a lease agreement. Those lease agreements are normally market fair prices. We really haven't had any issues with that. And what we offer to the community, I think Marnie covered that already in her presentation, right? So again, thank you for the opportunity. This concludes my presentation, Mr. Mayor. We will be happy to take questions if there is any.
Well, thank you all for the presentation. That was very, very informative and much appreciated. Lots of good information there. I will ask for a motion to receive the presentation from council, and then we'll see if there's any questions. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Council Vale, seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. Are there any questions for any of the presenters regarding the cell gap? Councillor Ashmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ortega. You mentioned about 5G, and I was just wondering, I didn't hear any mention of 6G. Now, I know 5G is quite an improvement on what we have, but if you just across the border, they've already had 5G and probably will be in 6G, Verizon and AT&T. They'll be 6G, I think, if not by now. I'm just wondering why we're not looking at 6G right now, because that seems to be what the future is right now. Just your comment on that. I know 5G is quite good, but it seems like 6G is what the future is in a lot of countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, right now, our plans are to continue deploying 5G across the nation. We have the largest 5G network in the country. I'm really not familiar if to deploy 6G, we need any sort of auction or something in the future. So we'll have to take that one back and provide you an answer after. I'm really not prepared to answer that question.
Just another question, if I could. And when you look at the map, there's an area. If you go to, I've been through there not too long ago, maybe about 6 months ago, Bancroft. When you go from Bancroft to White Lake or Arnprior, there's a 2-hour gap. There's 2 hours without any cell coverage, and even after this project's completed, I see that area. It's still not covered. I'm just wondering. I know it's a low population, but there's quite a few people there. It just looks like an area that's never, ever been covered. Will that be covered? It just seems like they always seem to get left out, those folks. It's north of here, but just wondering if you're familiar with that area.
So maybe I can take that, Councillor Ashmore, through you, Mr. Mayor. With our demand model, if there are properties and premises in that area that pay taxes and they're captured by MPAC, they are in our demand area and they are part of that 99%. That is our goal.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? I think your frequently asked questions certainly covered a couple that I had, so thank you for that. That was well done. Any final questions for any of our presenters on this presentation? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to receive. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's passed. So thank you very much for sharing your time with us today, and we look forward to working with you as we move this project forward, and much to the benefit of our constituents. So thank you, and thanks to Eorn for all the work you've put into that as well. Go ahead, Jim. You want to sum up?
No, just to thank you again, Your Worship and members of council, for the opportunity, and to thank our Rogers partners and Lisa and everybody for the hard work. Thank you.
Yep,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and I know it's a team effort, so we appreciate the work everybody's doing, and keep up the great work. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point of our meeting, that's it for presentations. We don't have any reports. At this point in our meeting, City Council will go into closed session to consider the item under Section 8 of the agenda. All remaining staff, with the exception of the CAO and the clerk, are now instructed to leave the meeting. Please, as per our procedural bylaw requirements, I'm asking all remaining participants in our meeting today to confirm to me by raising your hand that you are in a private room where no other person can overhear the deliberations and the internet connection is secure and not publicly accessible. Can you please confirm that by raising your hands? Okay, confirm, thank you. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the following motion, that council convene into closed session at 2:43 p.m. pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act in order to consider the matters identified in section 8 of the special council meeting agenda of Tuesday, June 29th, 2021, namely item 8.1. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Seymour Fagan, second by Councillor Elmsley. All those in favor? And that is passed. At this point in the meeting, the live stream of this meeting on YouTube will now be temporarily paused for members of the public. When closed session is complete, the live stream of the meeting will resume to address the remaining open session items on the agenda. So I will just ask that we'll take a 5-minute stretch. We'll come back at 2:50 and we'll deal with close. Thank you. Okay, we're back online. We have a statement from matter from closed session. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Council received and discussed the public complaints, and direction was provided to the mayor for a response back to the complainants as per the Corporate Complaints Handling Policy CP 2021-028.
Thank you. At 10, I need a confirming bylaw, that the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a special meeting of council of June 29th, 2021 was read a first, second, third time, and the corporate seal attached. Moved by Councillor Dunn, second by Councillor Richardson. All in favor? And that is passed. And I just want to, before we adjourn, wish everyone a great summer. Our next meeting is in August. It will be an in-person meeting. So get out, get your vaccine, get out on a patio, get to a restaurant, support your local business, have a little bit of fun this summer. And if I can ask for one request, is just relax. Try to enjoy a little bit of the summer. It's been a tough year for everybody. So enjoy yourself. Take a little bit of time for yourself and your family. And just do what you need to do. And we'll see you back in August, folks. Have a wonderful summer. I need a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Elmsley, seconded by Councillor Vale. All in favor? And that's passed. And we'll see you back in person in August. Take care, folks.